Adding a new addition to the Wellness Journey podcast series, we present Loving the Natural You. As we travel through life, our mind, body, and spirit go through a multitude of changes. And without taking time to learn about these changes, you might feel lost, insecure, and unhappy. It's time to establish peace with those transitional periods we experience in midlife. It's time to focus on ways to honor your temple and locate your inner joy. Join me, Lynnis Woods-Mullins, on Wellness Journey podcast series as we talk with a new group of forward-thinking experts who can provide insight and help us develop another level of self-awareness through loving the natural you. Hi, my name is Lynnis Woods-Mullins, and welcome to another edition of the Wellness Journey podcast series. For this particular series, we are focusing on loving the natural you. What does that mean? Well, for me, it means loving who you are as you are right now in this moment in time. Not feeling like you have to do this to be better, or when you do this, you'll be good enough, but accepting who you are and loving that bit of you. I really truly do believe that we were created with all kinds of gifts, talents, and abilities that lie within us, that whatever it is that we desire, whatever our dreams are, we already have so much within us to help us to get to where we want to go. Today we're going to be talking about that in particular, about a young woman's dream of maybe having her own business and some of the obstacles that she has faced while moving on her journey to wellness. Her name is Tracey S. And let me tell you, I met Tracey as a result of working on a collaborative book project. She is one of the co-authors of Power Up Superwoman. And I know you've heard me talk about that before, but this is a book that is a compilation of stories about courage and empowerment for women, written by 16 women from all over the world, all kinds of different backgrounds, but very much on the same journey of growing and becoming their best selves. Tracey Yang is a thought leader, she's a business owner, and she's an artist. She uses her life experiences, such as previous chronic illnesses, to use as examples in her writing in the hopes that others can find their own form of greatness. She currently resides in mid-northern Alabama, and it's kind of interesting. You won't see this until after I've gone to Alabama, but in a couple of weeks I'll be in Alabama, and Tracey and I will be on the local television show talking about Power Up Superwoman. I'm really excited about that, but I'm super excited to have her on the Wellness Journey podcast series. Welcome, Tracey. It's wonderful to have you here today.
Thank you for allowing me to be here. I'm so excited.
Yeah, you're welcome. So tell me a little bit about you and why you decided to write that chapter. And tell us a little bit about the chapter for Power Up Superwoman.
Well, in my chapter, I decided to talk about two things. And I decided to talk about persistence and also lies and how you view yourself. And I believe these are two important things for every person to consider, because sometimes we go through a negative experience and then we just give up. And I think somebody can take from this. And whenever we have failure or negative experience, we can learn from it and then use that learning as stepping stones in order to be successful. And the second part I talk about in my chapter is lies and then how we view ourselves. And I believe how we view ourselves is very important to be successful. And so that's a little bit of why or how of what I talked about.
Okay. Well, I know you have a personal story in terms of your own wellness journey. Tell us a little bit about that. We were chatting a little bit before we came on, and you mentioned that you had two ailments. And what were those? And what were the symptoms?
Well, the first thing I had was Epstein-Barr, which is a virus. And then the second thing I had was gastroenteritis, which is basically inflammation of the stomach due to infection. And I was sick for roughly 2 years. And I took this time to self-reflect about life. And that's actually how I became an author, because I began writing. And I began writing quotes on my social media accounts. And from there is where my publisher found me. And he asked me to join on the project with amazing women from across the globe.
Yeah, it really is. It's amazing. And I feel so fortunate to be a part of such a wonderful group of women. And when you were sick, And I think this is important because, this show, a large percentage of our audience are women over 40, 50, and beyond. And some of us are beginning to experience some things going on with our body that may not be the best fun. And some of us are actually beginning to come down with chronic diseases and getting sick. So how did you keep yourself motivated? How did you persevere while you were going through that experience?
Well, one thing for me personally, is my faith. It helps me a lot. And then I stay focused on my purpose as well. And I believe everyone in life has a purpose. And so that keeps me motivated. And also, something that I encourage people to do is to have or develop a focus on your goals. And so, one thing that brings me to mind is when I was younger, I played sports, and my dad and my mom are also coaches. My mom actually coached Division I volleyball for many years.
Wow.
Yes. So I grew up in that atmosphere when I was younger. And one thing I remember is my dad, when he's coaching me in basketball, he would, for free throws, he would put pressure on me, because in the game, you have to stay focused and you can't pay attention to the crowd. And so that's something that when we are experiencing certain things, we have to stay focused. We can't pay attention to haters or other people that are saying negative things to us. And so that's something that I encourage everyone to develop,
Mm-hmm.
to stay focused on.
Is that focus? Yeah, I agree with you. Focus is really so important in so many ways throughout our lives. But I think, it's really harder these days because there's so many distractions. I mean, just before we came on, I had to close out some windows because I could see things popping up, and I closed out your interview form. I said, oh, that's too many closeouts. But there's just so many distractions. What would your advice be for women who want to get focused in order to find their purpose? How should they go about doing that?
Well, I think that takes training, and with anything, it takes training. So I think it takes practice and maybe making mental notes in your brain of saying, okay, don't do this, don't do this. I'm going to allow this sort of time to think about this. So if you want to think about something negative, only allow, not negative, but something, if you're experiencing something negative, only allow yourself to think about that for maybe 10 minutes a day or 30 minutes and say, okay, stop. I need to do this now.
I like that because for women who suffer from anxiety, I'm a anxiety survivor. I had an anxiety disorder. And one of the things that I learned is that it really is important that you just go ahead and lean into it, allow yourself to feel it instead of trying to push it back. So those negative thoughts, okay, fine. Go ahead and have those negative thoughts, like you said, for about 10 minutes or so. And then after that, say, okay, that's it. That's enough. Time to move on. Because you can really go down that rabbit hole of negativity, and it's really hard to dig yourself out. I've been there, where everything seems to be crashing in. I feel that if you really want to manifest something different in your life, the first step is to really take control of your thoughts and the things that you're thinking. Or as you mentioned, the lies that we tell ourselves. Why do you think women why do you think we tell ourselves so many lies? Why do you think that is?
Well, I think for society standards, we have a lot of pressure on ourselves. And so we get it from a very young age, from the media, from the people around us. We have certain expectations. And so since that we have that pressure, we tend to take on a lot in our lives.
Yes, social media doesn't help. In fact, I understand when I remember your article or the chapter that you wrote, you talk about that. Share what happened to you and how you allowed that to make you stronger.
Well, one thing I like to do is, again, I like to learn from my experiences. And in the chapter that I talked about, my second part of the chapter, the lies, I had one friend who was, I was naive at this age, but he was not a very good friend to me. He said negative things. And one thing he told me is that I will never amount to anything in life.
Wow.
Obviously, it's not true because everyone has potential to be something and do something with their lives in some way. And so I had to learn to say, no, this is not true.
Mm-hmm.
To keep being myself and growing and learning and just embracing who I am.
Yes, I agree. That is so important. I've been reading a lot of the writings of Wayne Dyer lately. And one of the things he talks about is how we seek our value. I think that we as women have to really get the idea that looking outside of yourself for validation is such a setup. Because first of all, many times people don't necessarily know what you need or what you want. And so while you're waiting for them to validate you in a certain way, you're just setting yourself up for disappointment because they're just not going to get it. And it may be this not because they don't support you or they don't want to validate you, but they're not you. And if there's something about telling them how to validate you that kind of gets lost in translation sometimes. And the other thing is that many times human beings will say things to you that really tear you down. Sometimes they don't mean to, other times they do. And you have to decide at some point in time, okay, how do I define myself? Do I define myself what others think about me, what others say about me or to me? Or do I define myself based upon who God says I am, based upon who I feel I am? And I think that that is really a key when it comes to getting past some of that negative messaging that we give ourselves. Tracey, I really liked your chapter. It was one of my favorites because I like that concept about the lies that women tell themselves, what we just got through talking about. When people read your chapter, and women in particular, what is it that you want them to take away from that?
Well, what I would like for them to take away is to, like you said, to value themselves and also to not give up because, like I said before, everyone has a purpose and you have potential. And so that's something that I would like everyone to take away from my chapter.
Yeah, I agree. I think that a lot of women are aware. Everybody says, well, you have potential, you have potential. But there's that other side of it. Yeah, I have potential, but a couple of things. When will that potential be realized? Or in some cases, even women my age, and I'm, in my 60s, don't know exactly what their purpose is or what their passion is. They're not sure. For women who are searching, what kinds of tools could you give them or what kinds of advice could you give them in terms of discovering what their passion is or what their purpose might be?
Well, your passion comes from something that you enjoy doing. And so that's one of the things I would suggest looking at is what do you like to do? And it's something that is a part of who you are. It's something that you can't stop doing. So, for example, for me, I can't stop writing. I can't stop speaking. And
Mm-hmm.
then as time goes on, I'll get better and better. And that's just for everyone. It's something that's a part of you. And so that's just something I would suggest. And even if you're not the best at it at this moment, everyone starts as beginners. I would just suggest beginning doing it and you'll get better and better as time goes on.
And I agree. I think where your passion is, so lies your treasure.
Yes.
So if there's something that you're really passionate about, it could be that you make the best bread dough ever and you enjoy doing it. Well, maybe that's something that you might want to pursue. You might want to, build a business around that or sell it or partner with someone else who's good at business and open a restaurant. You never know where that might lead you. That's how I got into doing what I'm doing now. I was diagnosed with an anxiety disorder and I started doing research to find out what I could do to minimize the symptoms besides just dropping a pharmaceutical. I was dropping pharmaceuticals for maybe about a year. And I decided, I don't want to do this anymore. There's got to be something else that I can do besides taking medication to feel better in my body. So I started, reading about it. And I've always had a passion around nutrition for some reason and fitness because I used to be a dancer. And as I began reading more about wellness and mind, body, spirit wellness and holistic practices and all of that. I mean, I would spend hours and hours and hours at the computer just researching and finding out more information. And next thing I know, I've got this business. And, it's been 10 years that I've been doing this. And the majority of the time, it's been more like a passion than just a business because there are so many things about what I do that is resonating with my spirit. And if I were to tell anybody about what they need to be thinking of when it comes to pursuing their passion or finding out what their purpose is, what resonates when you're doing it? How does it make you feel? Does it make you feel, joyful, engaged, alive? Does it make you want to learn more? If you're feeling that way when you're doing some of those things, then you might have your aha. And many times passion and purpose may not necessarily mean you're supposed to open a business or leave your 9 to 5 or anything like that at all. It may mean that this is something, a great hobby that becomes your first love kind of thing that you enjoy doing. But I agree with you. Everybody has a purpose. Everybody has these passions that lie within. And when you go through, like, for instance, a chronic disease like that, what happens with that passion? Do you think the chronic disease led you to your passion? How did you figure that out as you were being sick and going through that?
Yes, you brought up a good point, and you made me think about this as well, is sometimes when we experience something traumatic or we go through something difficult, that can actually lead us to a purpose as well. Mm-hmm. I do know that if I had not have went through what I went through, I would not be doing what I'm doing today. And so sometimes when we go through traumatic experiences, what makes us so vulnerable and so weak, it can actually lead us into our greatest strength and our greatest power. And so that's just something that I learned and that I took from my experiences.
I absolutely agree with you. I developed an anxiety disorder as a result of post-traumatic stress. And I talk about this in my chapter. And the post-traumatic stress came from how I found out that my mother had been killed. She was hit by a fire truck on her way to work. And how I found out about it was extremely traumatic. And I took that situation, and I realize now, and that's been 30 years ago, it was just 30 years ago this year. But it took me 20 years to realize that something was wrong. And it was really, I had one of those breakdown epiphany moments where I just couldn't go one more day without acknowledging how I was feeling. And isn't that so much like being a woman many times? We feel a certain way in our bodies. And if it isn't totally debilitating, we just kind of put it off, because we're busy doing other things for other people, busy living our lives, sometimes in denial about how we're feeling, until you have this situation, this breakdown situation where you really can't go one more minute feeling this way without doing something about it. And that's what happened to me. And I have to say that if it hadn't been for what happened to my mom, I would not have had the breakdown that led me to want to get well, that led me to finding out about mind, body, spirit wellness, that led me to the idea of, putting together podcasts and a magazine and coaching services, and now even participating in a book to help women reconnect with themselves in a healthy way. That would have never happened. So, sometimes what negative entities will set up for bad, positive entities, what I call God, will turn around for good. And that's kind of how I feel life has a tendency to go.
Yes, I completely agree with that. And for me, that's what happened as well. When I was had a chronic illness, it set me up, like you said, to become an author and to start speaking and to start writing. And so people can find their voice, and that can turn into something positive for their life.
Mm-hmm. Yes, it can. And I like what you said about finding your voice. I think that one of the biggest challenges that we as women have as we age, because we do play so many roles, and we're mothers, we're wives, we're sisters, we're daughters, we're employees, we're nurturers, we do all these other things. And sometimes who we are, the initial impetus of who we are or who we want to be, gets kind of lost. And it really takes an effort to find that voice. And I think one of the first steps is when you're working on finding your voice, you have to let yourself know that attempt, that first attempt or whatever it is, it doesn't have to be perfect. It doesn't have to be just right. We are all a work in progress. I mean, I remember when I did my very first show, which was like about 9 years ago. I mean, I didn't even know what the internet was really. I used it as a recruiting manager for resumes on Monster. I would use it that way. And we had email, okay? And this is back in like 2007. But I really didn't know what it was. I thought it was a big deal when I found out about Facebook. I was like, whoa, my kids, I have 4 daughters. And at that time, they were young teenagers. Like, Mom, we've already been on there and off. And I'm like, what? Yeah, I found out about Facebook in 2009. I thought I was doing something. I was that behind. And so when the idea came to do a radio show online, I didn't really know what that was. I interviewed many, many people before in my career, but I'd never done a show before, never done anything on the radio before, never done anything on the internet before, didn't even know what social media was to be able to promote the show. But now here I am, 10 years later, and I tried to figure out, my assistant and I tried to figure out how many shows I've done in that 10 years, well over 1,000 shows. Well over 1,000 shows. But when I first got started, after that first interview, I was sweating, I was sick, I was upset because it wasn't good enough, all this stuff. But I did enjoy it. And I think if it's something you enjoy and something that you have a passion for, you'll work out the kinks. You'll figure it out.
I completely agree with you. It's, like we were talking about, it's something that you enjoy and something that you mentioned, it makes you uncomfortable. That's something also to consider. It will make you uncomfortable because it stretches you, but at the same time, you'll enjoy it as well.
How do you push through that, being uncomfortable? That's a very good point, because usually when you want to grow, when you want to do something beyond your comfort zone, it's uncomfortable.
Yes. Well, one thing I would encourage people to do is, if you can't do something big, you start out small. So you take tiny steps. And so, like, if someone has a fear of if they have a phobia, social phobia of talking, then maybe they leave the house and go to the grocery store. And then as time goes on, they do a little bit more and a little bit more. And so that's something that I would encourage people, and then also become comfortable with the uncomfortable. So become comfortable being uncomfortable.
Yes. Right. Kind of you're right. Kind of get in a space where, okay, this doesn't feel real good, but my ultimate goal is this. So therefore, I'm going to endure some of this stuff that doesn't feel right so I can get to where I want to go. I don't know. I feel like anything worth having, anything worth accomplishing, it's going to take some muscle. It's going to take some, your faith muscle, your confidence muscle, your self-love muscle, certain things that maybe are kind of weak, we're going to have to strengthen a little bit. But I can tell you from my own personal experience that we have in us so much that we don't use. I mean, and studies show that we only use 9% of our brain as it is. So I guess we're saying, use 9.1 to get to that goal or that desire, that intention that you've set, that objective that you have to achieve it. The series is about loving the natural you, basically loving yourself for who you are in this moment in time. What do you feel about that? Are you there yet? Are you loving the natural you? And if not, how are you going to achieve that?
Well, this is something I actually struggled with when I was younger. And I think at that age, when we're teenagers or young adults even, we're struggling or trying to find who we are because we're growing into adulthood. And that's one thing that I struggled with. And I had to learn how to accept myself and who I am. And that's actually when I started to blossom, because when you accept yourself and who you are, you start to show your gifts and your talents. You don't hide them anymore. And then you really start to be successful then, because that's how you are or can be successful, is through allowing yourself to be who you are, and it allows your gifts to just flourish.
Yes, and I guess basically embracing who you are and finding favor. I mean, my goodness, you can't be all bad. We have a tendency to pick away at ourselves, and this isn't right, and that's not right. And especially for women in midlife, our bodies are changing. I can tell you, one of the things that happened to me when I started my business, for whatever reason, my chemical makeup changed. It could have been the pharmaceuticals I was taking, who knows? But I developed a allergic reaction to hair dye, and I was so in denial about it. I would still use the hair dye. I mean, and I would look like a Gila monster afterwards. My hair would be, black, but my forehead would be protruding. My scalp was oozing. My eyes were shut. I looked so bad that I scared my daughters one time. I mean, and then I looked at this 5 different times. And the last 2 times I ended up in the ER because I had to get an epinephrine shot. Back then, they didn't give it to you. You had to go to the hospital to get it because my esophagus was closing. So finally the ER doc was like, Lynnis, you know what? You may want to consider the fact that your life is a little bit more important than the color of your hair. And I know he was kind of teasing me a little bit, but I said, you know what? That's right. At that point, I was like about 56 years old. I'd earned every gray strand in my head, okay? So what was wrong with learning to love this unique part of who I was? I'm going gray. I have, for whatever reason, developed an allergy. And believe me, I tried everything out there, even henna, which worked, but it turned my gray hair yellow. So, I have black and yellow hair. So that didn't work. So I realized that this just wasn't for me. And rather than just hit my head against the wall and keep doing it over and over again, I said, okay, there must be something in this that I'm supposed to learn. And there was. I started letting my hair grow into being gray and started wearing my hair natural, no more chemicals, no more perms or any of that kind of stuff. And a lot of times my listeners know, those of you who look at the video portion of my show, you know that I usually wear my hair up in a turban with my hair all curly, or I wear my whole hair all curly down, or sometimes I do a little bit more and blow my hair out dry like this. But I just stopped caring so much about the color of my hair. I mean, I look back at that now, and at 62, I'm thinking, well, at least I have hair. Because sometimes what happens as you get older, you start dealing with hair loss, And probably if I had continued with putting the hair dye in my hair, that would have been me as well. So sometimes, changes happen into your life to strengthen you, but also to propel you to where you're supposed to be. I'm a holistic living and wellness coach. How do I look like putting chemicals in my head every day? It's bad enough that I wear makeup. I'm not changing that, okay? I'm just not changing that. But I can at least say that I am chemical free when it comes to my hair. So, that's just a small example, but a powerful one in terms of how we have to learn to go with that change in our bodies as we get older. I think that many times there's a reason for it. And I'm talking about the changes not the changes in terms of getting sick, but just the changes that come with getting older and wiser, which you will soon find out about, Tracey. Because I know you're not quite there yet, but you'll be there soon enough, that's for sure. Moving forward, what's going to be happening for Tracey? Where do you see yourself going over the next 5 years?
Well, for me, I want to continue my writing and speaking, and also my business, Kier Production.
Yes.
I want to continue doing that with videography. And really, my goal for that is to have positive influence. And you can find that in all my work.
Yes.
Like my speaking and writing everything is positive and how to become your best self. But I also move that into my videography as well. And I hope to start doing shows and stuff eventually, as well as the service part. And so I'm looking to influence people in a positive way there as well.
Fantastic. Well, I know that you'll do a great job. Your article or your chapter in the book, Empower Up Superwoman, is fantastic. I've loved it. I know it will resonate with a lot of people who are searching and looking for a way to get past whatever their particular challenges are. And thank you so much for sharing your story and your philosophy of life. It's really wonderful to have you on the show.
Thank you for allowing me to be here.
And thank you so much. And thank you to all of you who are with us today. I am so excited about what's happening with the Wellness Journey podcast series. This particular series is full of wonderful advice about how to love the natural you. And I want to know, for those of you who are looking at this through YouTube, or Anchor FM or SoundCloud or Spreaker or iTunes, iHeartRadio, and all the different vehicles that we're on. I want to hear from you. Let me know what you think of the Wellness Journey podcast series, what you think about this particular show, and what you think about the topic that we discussed today. How are you learning to love the natural you? I would love to hear from you. Put your comments there below in the comments, or email me at wellnesswoman40@gmail.com. That's wellnesswoman40@gmail.com. Drop me a line and let me know what you think of our broadcast. I'd love to hear also the kinds of topics and even guests that you'd like to see on the show. Thanks so much for listening, and please remember that along your journey, you're going to run into some hills, and you're going to have a rocky path along the way. Sometimes it gets tough. But as long as you stay tuned in with the goal of getting with your MBS zone, what is that? Your mind, body, spirit zone. As long as you're in the zone, then you shall be well in your mind, body, and spirit. Thanks so much for listening, and we'll see you again next time. Thank you so much for tuning in. If you have something to share, please comment below. For more Wellness Journey shows, be sure to click the subscribe button below and check out my Facebook group, Wellness Woman 40 and Beyond. Continue taking this journey with us as we explore ways to be well in our mind, body, and spirit while loving the natural you.